to actually fresh up.
Yeah, man, we're just chatting.
Cool, let's go. Hey guys, welcome to Limits Podcast. We are all about discussing education and its intersection with society. In today's, that sounds so static. Wait,
Bro, be you.
Bro, be you.
cool. Like three. Hey guys, and welcome to Limits Podcast. This is our first episode.
Mine.
This is our first episode. I am so excited. I'm nervous at the same time. Welcome to Limits Podcast. Let's meet in the staff room. We are all about discussing education and its intersection with society. I'm really excited for today. I'm going to be your host for today, Sengulay-Thomas. And today's lesson plan is quite interesting. Today's lesson plan is it's titled The Time I Cried 8 Times in 24 Hours.
Now,
Jesus.
What's 8 times?
Help us
24 hours.
8 times in 24 hours.
I think what's mad funny as well, is the fact that when we were planning this, right, I thought this was Mamus.
Yeah,
you was
The thing is,
and you thought it was me.
No,
I thought it was just only because I just thought, you really had a rough ending. I was thinking, you must have had a really rough day.
Yeah.
But when it came up, it was Zion. I was like, huh? Why?
Yeah, no, honestly, this is a day that really changed my life, to be honest. So, just to give a bit of background, I think it's something that it's of course, organic story, true story. And you're gonna I'm gonna keep you, in a bit of suspense. So you're gonna find out why towards the end. But just to give a bit of background to what really kind of happened, I'm gonna kind of share the short story, how it's gonna really proceed. We'll kind of a bit of discussion, try kind of explore again the nature of a podcast, what is actually going on. What took place, why did I cry 8 times in 24 hours, and what does this mean, how does this maybe affect me, what does it mean within a school, and maybe what lessons can we take from this. So if you guys are ready for story time,
I'm sorry.
Let's do it.
You'll see on a campfire. So it was actually it all starts when I graduated from university. So I went to Essex. As I said in the kind of intro, I studied sports science. I grew up playing football. Of course, semi-pro football. I actually got injured. And I remember I was then started playing tennis in year 10 and 11. Was going tournaments with the school. And I remember my coach, Mr. Everingham, was saying, maybe you should consider going to the LTA, the Lawn Tennis Association. I was in year 11, so I thought it's too late for, any of that kind of stuff. So, let's go uni. And of course, that was the only option. Anyway, went uni, did sports science only because I like sports. So I didn't really at that moment consider what do I want to do. Went to uni, went to Essex, did sports science. Could have, maybe focused a bit more, maybe put a bit more effort. Some of you guys were on my uni journey, so, amen. But, what was really interesting was I only found out what I wanted to do on graduation day.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That was when I found out what I wanted to do.
I mean, that's after 3 years.
After 3 years. 3 years.
Well, yeah,
3 years.
it happens.
It happens. It's crazy.
It happens.
So it was, and this was the kind of moment where things really kind of became real. I grew up in Peckham. I was born in Sierra Leone. Grew up in Peckham during the whole kind of hype of gun and knife crime. Moved to Dagenham in year 6. Essex. I like to say Essex instead of London. I think it's cool. And again, I think growing up in that kind of time, it was when racism was quite real in the area. So grew up in the midst of that as well. And I think I had been quite accustomed and what's the word I'm looking for? Acclimatized to dysfunctionality, and living in maybe a society where people did not have opportunity. Maybe some of us probably did as well. Where people did not have opportunities, people didn't really think too far ahead. In life, and things were a bit more kind of spontaneous, impulsive. And I grew up around that, and for a period of time in my life, that was fine. That was the standard, we're kind of living at. So that's what I kind of grew up with, kind of really seeing. I remember when things really kind of changed. I came out of a train station from graduation when I came home, and I remember seeing two boys across from the train station. So if you're in Dagenham, Beacon Station, not Beacon Street, that's a
I
place.
actually say Beacon Tree.
Beacon Street.
I actually say Beacon Tree.
I saw these two young boys. Oh no,
Bye.
takes flights home.
As
I saw two boys, and what was really significant was when I was actually leaving to go to university, I saw these same two boys. And when I was leaving, they were just, doing road, you say as-well behavior on the street, messing around, etc. So when I was coming back from graduation, I saw the same two boys. And literally, when you see movies where something hits someone and everything goes slow motion and it's like, the world makes sense.
Yeah.
I had that moment where I thought, how did I go to uni, get a degree, make all of these friends, have all of these experiences, learn the language which I've forgotten, and
What language did you learn?
it was Spanish.
Oh God. I was like, what?
Like, how did I, have the opportunity to do all of these things, and I've come back after 3 years, and these young boys are in the same place.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment, like, everything clicked, and I said to myself, I do not want to go into sports. So I was actually looking at graduate opportunities in physiotherapy as a natural progression. I said, I actually don't want to do that anymore. And I chose to volunteer for a educational charity, shout out City Year. So if you know about City Year, you volunteer within primary or secondary school. It's voluntary, you get a kind of stipend of £200 a month, but living in London, that is basically nothing. The days were, waking up at 5, 6 a.m. Had some responsibility over a few enrichment lessons, had a kind of focused list of students, and again, the school was a free school. We'll kind of go into that a bit more. And yeah, let me kind of stop there. That was the real context. That was the real context. I will probably begin to tell a bit more story as we go along, but it was a free school. I'm not sure if you guys know what a free school is. Anyone kind of aware of that?
So yeah, I actually worked in a free school. There's different types of free school. So one of the ones that I actually worked in was what's called a UTC, so a University Technical College. And that was actually my first job finishing my PGC training. So that was the first role that I had as a PE teacher. So it was a sports science specialist. So that was the reason why they built it. It was in Tottenham, so it was linked with Tottenham Hotspurs. So it was funded by Tottenham Hotspurs, and it was an interesting experience as a teacher there, because the numbers, essentially it was the last school, because of how it works, they don't take students on from year 7. They start from year 9. So it's 14 to 19 year olds. They start from year 9 and then up to year 13. So it's interesting because what happens is that essentially they kind of like poach students from other schools. So if a student is interested in sports, science, technology, engineering, they actually go to the career fairs in a way to sort of poach students. But what happens with those free schools, and this was the experience that I had, is that it's not necessarily, sounds really bad to say, but this is, I guess, the language it is, it's not necessarily the students that the school wants or the the founders of the school want. It's essentially the ones who don't have any other choice. So the kind of students that we were getting were essentially students that were one step away from going into a PRU or going in a PRU, pupil referral unit, or one step away of going into some other form of alternative education because they were on the verge of being kicked out of a mainstream school. So that's the type of students that we now had, and it was very small numbers. Tottenham is a very big, it's a large borough, and so they have a lot of other schools anyway, a lot of mainstream schools anyway. So it was interesting that, like I said, the students that we were getting, it's not necessarily that they were low ability in that sense, but we had a lot of students who were on the SEN register. We had a lot of students who were from a disadvantaged background. Tottenham, again, we as everyone knows, is one of the most one of the more disadvantaged boroughs in London. So the students we were getting, it was an interesting group of students, and it was very small numbers as well. So in that first year, I got there when the school had opened or was built in 2014. I was there in 2015, so it had been open for a year. Already half of their numbers had left to go into a mainstream school because the school wasn't getting the results that the business holders wanted. And so it caused a whole, it was interesting. It was literally education and business mixed together, and the results they wanted were what you would see in sort of like a high sales sort of business, high sales environment. So they wanted A stars and A's. This was back when it was letters and before it turned to numbers. They wanted A stars and A's from students who were on the verge of being kicked out of mainstream schools, and they wanted that in a year. It's impossible. So it was a really interesting environment. I think I did most of most of what I know now as a teacher came from being in that school, to be honest, as an MQT. So
Just an interesting academic fact. The neoliberalism will call that the business model of education. So actually what you see within businesses is now what is replicated within the schools. So that whole drive for attainment, that whole drive for funding, so schools competing for state and private funding, academies, so where you're seeing actually a lot of state schools are losing resources and academies are becoming privatized. It's all a business model. So actually, as you said, sometimes it's not really the pupils or the students that are the core of the institution. It's what can these privatized businesses get from this, what money can they get from this, what kind of funds. So that's what when you look at the education system in the UK, that's what we're really seeing right now. So with the rise of academies, free schools, it's the business model of education. But for people who do not know what a free school is, I'm just going to give the kind of quick definition from the government website. Free school is a state-funded school. It can be state-funded, it can be private-funded, and it's actually purposed to meet the needs of a specific demographic or borough. So actually, when you look at free schools, you know, we can come together as maybe a charity organization and say, oh, you know what, Peckham has this issue of maybe disadvantaged young people. Let's develop a school which is tailored to the needs of this community and help them. That would be the kind of initial conversation. So what you find is, as you kind of rightly said, most free schools have maybe a level of specialism. What you also see with free schools is they can actually dictate their own curriculum. So they can ascribe, you know, to the national curriculum on certain levels of science, maths, English, etc. But they have that freedom to create their own curriculum. So the school that I was in, you know, there were so many enrichment activities. Oftentimes they invested in the vocational aspect. So the school that I was in, you know, it was known as a state-mentored school. So a lot of young people there suffered from poor mental health or disabilities or learning differences, should I say. A lot of them, as you said, had been excluded. A lot of them were from maybe single-parent homes. A lot of them, I remember a specific student, you know, was an orphan, she was fostered. And this was the main makeup of the school. I remember sitting with maybe young people and the conversations they would have, I'm just thinking, how are you exposed to this level of life, you know? So this was the makeup of this school. And it was very difficult. So having that kind of focus list, you know, I would have maybe 10 students and I would have to be in maybe one of them's English class, then the next lesson I'm in a year 9 science class, and the next lesson I'm probably teaching an enrichment class on maybe development. The next lesson I'm in another drama class, and that was what that role really looked like. We never really got a definition of our role. It was either, I just called it mentor, TA. That was my kind of role there. But yeah, that's what a free school is. So I think I'm not sure, did you guys know what a free school was before or had that kind of depth?
I've always known of a free school. I mean, I went to a state school. So, and that's the school I teach in now. So it's funded by the local authority. I've never really done too much research into free schools, but I do know a lot of students are moving towards free schools and academies, and I think this conversation is quite nice because it's giving me that knowledge on why that's happening. And it's interesting that you said that schools are almost operating like a business. And I think the reason why I went into teaching was because I saw that there's young people who need good teachers who genuinely care about them, who genuinely want to take what's on the inside of them and almost give them affirmation that they can do whatever they want to do. And so I just find it a little bit sad actually that there's schools that are literally not, I don't know if I would call it doing it for money, if you want to call it that way, but you know, the focal point of a child is not at the forefront of their mind. And so is that really a school? Is that, you know, is that really a place where a child can be nurtured? I think, it's an interesting topic.
I mean, I currently work in an academy, and I think also as Monica was saying, the reason why I kind of got into teaching is because I saw the need for there to be direction and mentorship and connection between a teacher and a student, especially when young people are forced. I use that word quite purposely. Are forced to kind of make, you know, long-term decisions at such a young age, i.e., choose their GCSEs, i.e., you know, what career path they want to kind of go down. And similar to Monica, I'm literally just sitting here, just like gobsmacked at the fact that there are such things as, you know, schools who are trying to make money, but I'm trying to understand, like, you know, what is the purpose of a school, right? What is the purpose of a teacher? What is the purpose of, you know, the community of a school? And heavily, what comes to mind is this whole idea of a transmission of past and previous knowledge onto the next generation. And it's important to kind of do so in love. I don't know if you sound like a hippie or anything like that, you know, but
it's not that it's true. You cannot, and it's funny that you say what is the purpose of school, because I'm currently, I need this dissertation to finish. I'm currently studying a master's in education. So we look at things like the sociology of education. You look at the philosophy of education. You look at what was the purpose of education throughout Britain's history, and we look at all these things. And so it's interesting, you know, that it's moved from there's this sort of debate on powerful knowledge versus human flourishing. So is it that school is supposed to be a place where knowledge is acquired and then imparted to young people, and then they then transfer it on to other young people, and it's that? Or is it a place where we learn to be our best selves, as it were? We learn to be able to thrive and have a level of resilience that now enables us to be able to handle or navigate life as a whole, and that's the human flourishing side of things. So I don't know if you might have seen it, but I know for me, in my years of teaching, I've seen how that sort of shifted with different governments. So when Labour was sort of in power, it was about human flourishing. Then the moment that it moved to Tory, conservative, it then became about the acquisition of knowledge. And this is where you saw the change of the curriculum that moved into the what do they call it? The baccalaureate. So when they now focused on the academia, they focused on English literature, they focused on maths and science, whereas before there was a move into the more creative side of things when Labour was in power. So this again is tied into, as I mentioned before, the neoliberalism that comes into education, and it's always going to be that debate: powerful knowledge versus human flourishing. What is the purpose of education? So this is where you move from, you know, at first teachers were just there to teach. That's what we were doing. We're trying to get these kids their GCSEs, and this is what we're doing. They need their, when it was letters, I say when it was letters, and it seems like it was such a long time ago. But you know, when it was letters, you know, getting them those A stars and their A's, and that was it. Whereas with now, you know, there's been quite a big push in terms of pastoral, because looking at the child as a whole. But even with that, going back to sort of the business model of schools, that was the link. That's why the school that I was in, Tottenham UTC, that's why the specialism was sports science, because the aim was to try and now get them into Tottenham, working for Tottenham Foundation as sports coaches, as physios, as sports scientists. So it feeded into their business. So we're going to teach you all the specialist knowledge that we have, And the aim is that, so it's not necessarily money as such, it's economy as a whole. So you're going to be an asset to us as a business. So the reason why we opened this school is because we want to deal with you here, and we want to give you that level of knowledge so that you now come into our industry and you're now equipped for our industry. So it's very interesting, like you said.
I have a question just on this. I think there's my head is just I have a question. Just in your own kind of personal definitions, how would you define education? I have this debate, in my seminar in uni, but I'd love to kind of hear just off this kind of so far when we've kind of explored the business model and sometimes how privatization and, as you said, the economy of businesses really plays into the learning environment of the child. How would you define education? And I guess for you guys being teachers as well, I'd love to kind of hear about what kind of maybe pedagogical approaches you take within a classroom. I think that'd be really interesting. I'll start with you, Jay.
How do I define education? When I think about education, I think I do see it is the transmission or transfer of knowledge from one person to another. Yeah. But then I see a depth of relationship and interaction. When I think about education, and so how I am as a teacher is I am heavily relational. I am so pastoral, and this has influenced how I even relate to certain students, how I administer the behavior policy, how I praise the student, how I sanction the student, because it's all based on relationship. And I think education is something that isn't necessarily in a box, but it's something that is very much holistic in nature, because if you're teaching somebody something, I'm not only teaching by what I say, but I'm also teaching by how I act and how I interact with you. And so it's so important to understand that education has different facets to it. And I guess as a teacher, you need to be informed. You need to be informed, knowing that sometimes what you don't say, speaks even more volume than what you do say. But that's education to me.
Yeah, I think when I think of education, I think it's a place to facilitate learning. And learning doesn't necessarily just have to come from maths and English. You could be learning about yourself, learning about the things you like, the things you don't like. I think where schools have a place to educate, have a place to instruct children, just like Johnoi rightly said, it's our aura. Because, for example, when I was doing my PGC, I always remember my tutor telling me that if you want to create an environment for reading, you have to show the children that you also read. So when they're doing work, you take a book and you read. Because how can you teach a child something that you're not even doing yourself? Can you really call yourself an educator? And so, I think when I think of education, I think the place to facilitate learning, the place where children or young people can grow, they can acquire skills, they learn a lot about themselves. So that's what I would say on that.
I think it's a combination of all, and I think what was interesting is again going back to me doing my masters is that this is an age-old debate. What is education? It's forever changing and forever shifting depending on the power that we that's in control at the time. So but for me, I've always gone into my teaching and into education just thinking that, okay, this is first and foremost, it should be an extension of what takes place at home. And then even with that, it should be that I'm not just teaching you to be able to, the reason why you're able to function as a member of the society that you're in is because you have learned how to function in yourself. So you have learned to be your best self, which enables you to now be able to navigate things outside of the bubble that is school. Because when you think about it, in your entire life or the years of your life, schooling, so not necessarily education, but schooling in itself is actually very small compared to your entire life. So it's being able to navigate that. So education in itself is it's being able to facilitate a love of learning, a love of being able wanting to better yourself. Like it's not just okay, I'm gonna learn full-time school equals 16. God, I hope I got that right. Yes, I did. Yeah, so it's not just learning about your times tables, but it's also learning about yourself. Like you said, that self-awareness. Okay, what can I do? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And I think one thing that I've seen, unfortunately, with this with the push that there was for attainment over achievement and progress, if that makes sense, but the push that there was for attainment, it sort of left young people that inability to be able to navigate life. There's a lack of resilience that I sense that young people have, where they're unable to just navigate life. Once they leave school, it becomes such a difference, and it's almost like it's like a body shock, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm out of school, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And I don't think that should be the case. I think there should be a natural transition from primary to secondary to college to uni, even if you don't go to university. Secondary just into the wider world of life, because even in college there are things that you now begin to learn that are very different from school. So I just think there should be a natural transition of that, so that you just function as a human being. You're not just functioning as a student. That's not your role in life. You now actually function as a human being. So that's what I feel education should be. I should be facilitating your love of learning, and that will enable you to transition.
But do you know, I don't think schools actually do that. I don't think schools facilitate the love of learning, because when I teach in year one, for the listeners out there, and from the reception to year one, we do a lot of, it's not necessarily systematic as such. We do a lot of learning through play, and then parents come in and they're like, oh, but all my child is doing is playing. But if you understand like different theories, in terms of like how a child between the ages of 5 to 7 they learn a lot through play. And then I see in school as the child progresses, it just becomes so systematic. I see the timetable of like I see the timetable of different teachers, not necessarily in my school, but in other schools. And it's literally maths, English, practice, like practicing their SATs, or practicing like maths, or, and this is what I'm saying. And I think that is why you get children in secondary school who don't like school, because of how the system has just made it so systematic and so rigid, and they've pictured learning as a place where, you're just paper and pen, write and get on with it. And so it goes back to the question of, is the education system failing children?
It's really interesting, because I remember at work, also working in university, I come across, 18 plus, and sometimes mature students. And when dealing with kind of careers advice and employability skills and all of that, I remember a time I literally sat there and I thought to myself, how did you as a student get through every stage of compulsory education to university, and you have not figured yourself out? And I think what's really interesting in a lot of the things you guys said is, for me, it was the word facilitation of learning, and that ability, or that, I think the rationale for schooling is to facilitate and is to cultivate lifelong learning. In where I work, what we really kind of equate education to is that lifelong learning, lifelong exploration. And I think what we have really missing there is that lifelong aspect is completely eradicated. So actually, we say this all the time, Twitter or wherever, kids should be learning taxes. Kids should be learning how the functionalities of daily life. And it's interesting because we're now in university, I look at students, even mature students, and there is so much missing areas of simple like decision making, awareness of self, awareness of maybe skills, of passions, awareness of, even when I ask, why did you do this subject? And again, there's so many factors, but I think one, some students don't know why they did what they did. And it's now, how have you come to maybe such a pivotal point in life? And you're literally kind of blinded, you're blindsided. And I think that is what I see with kind of model. But I think one thing really interesting you touched on, which I've just really gone off script here, just to flow. You spoke about parents come in and they say, we've got a session coming up, so I'm not gonna go too much into it, but that it seems that there's that lack of engagement or lack of understanding between the school and life outside of school. And I guess from what you said now, what we see there is that actually the child has to be potentially two different people at home and in school. And I remember I'd done the essay on this and I thought, how difficult must it be for a young person finding themselves in the world, finding themselves to now have to put on a dual nature to be able to be what they expect you to be in the home, what the parents expect the education to look like, and then what they're actually getting within the physical environment of school. And it must be difficult. And we wonder why with young people there's this rise of poor mental health, this decline in actual attainment. I'm just going to say a few stats here. Just going back to free schools, 86% of approved free schools are actually in areas of need. And I find that so interesting. And what I wanted to kind of segue into was just based on some of these conversations, where you guys have potentially worked with students who, maybe by statistics, maybe, classified as, first generation, disadvantaged, maybe coming from a single parent home, all of these classifications. How have you seen education intersect with their ability to dream? One thing I said when I said to the kids I used to work with, I said, if you can dream it, you can be it. That's what I was known for there. And I wanted to really begin to understand in the school now where they may not have come from the best place. How have you seen school intersect with their ability to dream, their ability to become, their ability to actually visualize something?
As in, what is the school doing? Or what are schools doing?
Yeah, how have you, just holistically, how has the school environment affected young people in that area?
I'll just talk for myself. In terms of the school I'm in, or the schools I have been in, I'll put it that way. I think most schools don't really encourage children to dream as such from their values of the school. I think that as teachers, we almost put that responsibility on ourselves to open up the minds of children to dream. And I'll use myself as an example. I had a young girl in my class, and she struggled with maths. Like, she just hated maths. Every time maths came, you could see her face just drop. And I always used to say to her that you can do whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you put your mind to do.
Yeah.
And it was my words that allowed her to then dream, to the point where she wrote me a card before the end of term saying, hi miss, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for teaching me maths. So it's like she's always going to remember not just that she can do math, but that she can do anything that she puts her mind to.
Yeah.
And that could be whether that's getting a job in the future, that could be whether that's saving up for a house, etc. So I don't necessarily know if I would say schools facilitate children to dream, or whether that's teachers in the school that encourage that, which then I guess if teachers in the school do that, then as a school,
And 100% agree with that, because it was one of the reasons as to why in my third year of teaching I was fully going to leave the profession. Because I just thought, I feel so demotivated right now, because this is not the reason as to why I came into teaching. My plan for coming into this was not to, part of it, but it was not just to get you your GCSEs. It was not just to get you to pass summative tests, assessment tests. That's not the reason why I came into doing this. And it was one of the reasons why I thought, you know what, forget all of this. I'm going to go work for the Department of Education. Work in an office somewhere. Let me work behind the scenes, because all of this, it's long. And I think with that, it then becomes and it's funny because the change that I began to see, and we're talking only, 2-3 years ago, the schools that I worked in after that moment, again, it was that push for pastoral, it was that push for the whole student and well-being and things like that. So again, the reason why teachers did the things that they did was because the ethos of the school changed. So the culture of the school changed. Whereas before, the culture was very much academic. We need you to get these grades and this is what's going. It was very, what's the word that I want to use? Merit, let's just say it was very much based on merit. So if you work hard, that's the one. If you work hard, then you'll get the results. That's very much what it was like. So if you get these good GCSEs, then of course you can do what it is that you like. we all know that's not always the case. We know that that's not always what's going to happen. So it's sort of the shift in schools change. Now all of a sudden school ethos is began to move more towards you can be whatever it is that you want to be. But before that, so this is in my first 3 years of teaching, it was academic excellence. That's all that was being pushed, and that was the ethos. So I think the reason why, like you said, it's the teachers, individual teachers are able to change the mindsets of children is because they now begin to follow the ethos of an entire school and the culture of an entire school. So it before then, it was like an oddity to have a teacher tell you, if you want to do that, go ahead and do it, and to be speaking that sort of language, it was odd. Now, not so much, because the ethos of schools is beginning to change. It's beginning to shift towards that sort of language. So it definitely is teachers. I think for me as a teacher, it's a line that my mum said to me. So again, you'll find out a bit more about my personal journey in education. But I didn't do so well with education. I was not that child. It's not that it's not that I couldn't do it. I was just very lazy. Let me just put it that way. And it got to a point where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how that was going to be, and I think it was starting to trouble my mum. My mum was thinking, your older sister is done. Your younger brother is doing
this comparison.
And you're there in the middle, and you're just like, my mum was just thinking, what am I going to do with her? And I think it got to a point where my mum just said, you know what? I don't actually care what you do. Just be the best of whatever it is that you're going to do. Like, it was that one line, and I just thought,
that's
right. I was just like, So I don't have to be the lawyer, engineer, accountant that my mum, we all know Afro-Caribbean, we know that those are sort of the professions they want. I don't have to do that. But what my mum is telling me, that I need to be the best in whatever it is that I choose. And that change, it shifted something for me, because it broke off a limit. And that's now something that I say to my students. I look at them and I say, listen, I don't care what it is that you get for your GCSEs. You've told me you want the 9. Help me help you. I can't do it for you. I cannot take that exam for you. Help me help you. Let it be that you just give me your best. All I'm asking for, if your best produces a 5, but you've given me your best, I'm happy. You're happy because you left it all on the table. That's all I'm asking for. Leave it all there. So that way, when you leave this thing called school, because school is only one part of your life, when you leave this place called school, you know that you have no regrets, because you gave it your all. You gave your absolute best. And I think that's like you said, it's individual teachers now have to do that, but it's easier to do when it's now the ethos of an entire school, when it's the culture of an entire school. So
I just want to ask there, this is probably the last question for you guys. A mentor, I think we've got kind of 2 questions to pose, is kind of defined as someone who may be more experienced and knowledgeable, who teaches and nurtures the development of a less experienced individual for the purpose of development of success, etc. I think one thing interesting there with the points you made, Monica, was I thought straight away, would you then say, you have a kind of teachers has this informal mentor role that you take on when you enter the school arena? And then that's my question to you, and then for Mamus, and also Johnoi, where your mum had this kind of expectation, did you have a mentor? Did you have anyone who you potentially reached out to? And if you did, how did that really affect how you saw yourself and your ability, self-efficacy, your ability to actually achieve and attain?
So I know the question you posed to me, and I'm going to answer that. I was going to dip into what you posed to Monica as well. And I think just with this whole conversation, and as Mamus was saying about the school ethos, my current school, I absolutely love it. I love the fact that there's a focus on the idea, that community and bringing about that change, and we all play our part. Learning changes lives, and I absolutely love that. And so, in my day-to-day basis, I teach 4 to 5 subjects. I also mentor a couple of kids. I don't want to say legally, but I mentor a couple of kids, and then there's other students who have seen me interact with other kids and are asking to mentor them. So with the kids who I actually mentor and stuff, within my timetable, I have literally had to allocate certain times where we're going to have our sessions, and it's like, what makes it so good working at certain schools, and when the ethos is all about, the whole student or the whole kids, is that you can allot that time to focus on the child outside of the classroom. And when it comes to mentoring, again, from a young person's perspective, I'm putting myself in the shoes of a young person. I'm not young, but if I want a mentor to be patient with me, I want a mentor to be patient with my growth, because rightly said, you only found out what you wanted to do on graduation. I mentor kids who are in year 9, year 8, year 10, right? So when it comes to them, having mentorship, they kind of want you to kind of be patient with their growth, because sometimes in the sessions, I'll be scratching my head thinking, what are you doing? Like, I've actually got marking, I've done my year 11 paper to get done, but what are we talking? And then I have to literally remind myself, be patient with their growth, because they don't know what they need to be yet. And so this moment here, that's what's going to kind of add to the holistic development of it. So I think mentorship, it has to have, you have to have patience. You have to have patience. You're not going to yield the results straight away, but the fact that bit by bit you're chipping away certain mentalities and you're building certain habits, and it's a patient game, it's a waiting game. So
let's take one more answer.
I think with mentoring, and I think, to be honest, I've only seen the importance of it or realized the importance of it as an adult. So as an adult, I now have mentors. So I have a mentor for me in terms of my teaching. I have a mentor in terms of like just my general life and things like that. So I've only realized the importance of it as an adult. And I think it was funny because I think it was a LinkedIn post that you had, or it was a LinkedIn post that we went out somewhere, and it was something that I said, and then I put it as a LinkedIn post, and I said about treating young people as young people. Because we think so far ahead, and we think, oh my gosh, this is what they could be as an adult, and you don't realize that you actually start teaching them.
I do remember.
You don't realize that you actually start teaching them. They're not mini adults; they are young people. So the way that you need to interact with them or relate with them is as a young person, not as a mini adult. And I think that was something in terms of mentoring that I really had to take in. And in the school that I just left. They had a fantastic mentoring system. I've never seen anything like it. Each student had a personal tutor. I didn't get a personal tutor until I was at university.
Personal tutor?
So each student had their form tutor, which taught them, the PSHE stuff and the character education, all of that stuff. But then they also had a personal tutor, and they could go to this person about anything and everything to do with their life. So if things were happening at home, that was now affecting how they did things in school. And it was confidential to a degree, but it allowed for it to be that we knew everything that was happening with this child, so that we could be patient, so that we knew how to navigate their teaching and their learning to get them to where it is that we wanted them to be, obviously, as a school, because the school has their own things that it wants from the child, data, GCSEs, all of that stuff. But then it also allowed them to be able to be kids and learn to be kids, but also learn, what it's going to take to get into adulthood. And for me, I was shocked because I just thought, wow, 12 and you have a personal tutor. I was like, gosh, you're living your best life. I was like, my goodness. And it was just great to see how that works, because I was asked to be a tutor for some of these students, and it was just great how that worked, because they were able, once every term, they were able to just have that full-on conversation with you. So you had to meet them a minimum once every half term, and that was just the minimum. But I met with them all the time, and you just look at them in the school, you interact with them in the school, and I just thought, this is really great. And I think that's you said, the mentorship has to come from a place of relationship. Otherwise, it will still feel like teacher-student. It will still feel like that sort of in the classroom environment. The mentorship has to be a bit different, because it has to be outside of the classroom, because I think that's where it's most effective.
I think it's interesting there, just to kind of move on, how we've probably talked about this in a few other episodes, but the role of a teacher is so diverse. Who you have to be once you enter that school gate is limitless. And I think, let's give out just a shout out to teachers. You guys did an awesome job.
Pat myself.
But I think, just going back to the story time.
Can you actually tell us
what happened when I cried? Boy, so I gave the kind of context of the school. I gave the context of the school, and honestly, as you kind of rightly discussed, it was difficult waking up early, staying, and again, free schools can extend the school day. So we were in for breakfast club at 8:20, and then school would finish at 5. Like,
sorry?
Yeah.
And this is voluntary.
School would finish at 5.
Your harvest because
I mean,
Exactly.
when I'm applying for jobs, I look
And
and see
this-
the school of the day. If that thing finishes after 4,
God bless your
I'm
neighbour.
like-
I mean,
Do you know what was mad? Also, we got £200 a month. So I remember one day I was in a staff room calculating how much that was. It was £2 an hour. Obviously, it was voluntary, but when I wanted to calculate, when I thought this is £2 an hour, I thought,
you stay till
yo.
5 for £200 a
I
month.
thought, yo. When the hour went past, I was like, £4, £6.
that is so funny.
But
Ooh.
but I think, as we said, the relationship with the students was second to none.
Yeah.
I loved it. There's some who, based on mentoring, who have, kind of reached out now, and my mentor as well. And to see, they invited me back to their prom as well. So the year group I was kind of working with, I got, back to the prom and got to see them, all grown and what they've, just heard the stories and how school has been. And I, on the last day of school, went in normal day. They called us, me and my team, into the classroom, and I was supposed to bring it, but I forgot. They made 2 A3 posters with messages, and I sat down on the table and I looked at them. Yeah, big man. I looked
Wait,
at
you
them.
still have the posters?
I put them on my wall in my room.
Yeah,
Like,
it's amazing.
I saw a message here saying, "You taught me how to respect myself." Saw a message here saying, "Sir, I'm going to be what I want to be because of you." I saw another one saying, "Even though we didn't speak as much, just by watching you, it helped me change my behavior." And this was double-sided A3 posters.
Wow.
Students who I didn't even engage with felt like so many messages at full, even to the point where the teachers were getting annoyed at the students because they kept wanting to write more things.
Yeah.
And in all of the difficulty, in all of the hours, in all of the whole year, I was looking at my boys who were getting cars or jobs, they were going out enjoying themselves. I remember one time I went after work, I went out to Westfield and I bought trainers, and that was half my money for the month gone. So I mean, that was what that year looked like, kind of thing. If I wanted to enjoy it, I had to really make sure I enjoyed, that takeaway, So I was reading these notes and my eyes just welled up, and I cried. Like, it wasn't the cute cry, it was bogey. Snot was coming. Snot was coming all the way down my nose. I couldn't see out of my eyes because there was so much water.
Wow.
First cry done. End of school. The
So
kids
did
are
the
like,
ink not run?
no, because they laminated it as well.
Oh.
Laminated it.
They thought about
They
End of school, the kids all the teachers are like, oh no, obviously there's physical boundaries. The kids were just like, nah. They ran, they hugged us, like, cried again. On the way walking, the school finished, they did not go home. They waited for us to leave school
This is after
to
5.
walk us to after 5 to walk us to the station, and they just said so many amazing things. Cried. Got home now, looked at the note, cried. Went to bed, woke up, and I was so touched. I woke up. Yeah, that's fine. I woke up and I went to kind of pray, and I thought, let me just read this again. I was there, cried. Like, every time I looked at it, I cried. But moving into our kind of watercolor wisdom now, where we can share what this really meant for me. This was my knowing. This point was when I knew this is what my life is about. For one child to come and say to me, "I'm going to be what I want to be because of you," that's all I need. I could have done that whole experience again because of that. I would have gone through the whole 8:40 to 5, getting home at 7 p.m. and not going out, no socials. I'll do it again. And I think for me, that was when I knew. And actually, what was really kind of key about that was I had to learn through serving. So that's something I had to learn through serving. I didn't know the full extent to what this looked like. As I said, when I came out of uni, that's when I knew, okay, I wanted to help young people, but I didn't know in what context that looked like until I volunteered, until I put myself forward to actually say, I'm going to do something about this.
Yeah.
What I saw in Dagenham, what I saw in that inability for young people to progress in life, I had to make the decision to say, I'm going to do something about this. I didn't get financial reward. I was tired. I was stressed. The days were long. Students did get at you. But the result, the fruit at the end, outweighed everything that you could ever kind of bring against that. And I think that was my point. I think one thing really important there is actually when we see, you know, issues maybe within school, sometimes you are that difference. I remember, I forgot you made a quote, but if they said, if you're looking for an answer and you can't see it, it might be you.
Yeah.
And I had to be that person and take on that experience to really know who I was, what I wanted to do, and why. And actually, that's informed everything I've done since then. So from then, I went on to study a master's at UCL, which I'm about to complete now, hopefully in social justice and education. I decided to work in education, so I got a job working within school voluntary provisions and getting mentors for disadvantaged schools and young people. From there, I moved into kind of career advising to support young people along that transition, and actually now sit at the intersection of graduation and employment, you know, and everything that I do now going forward has literally been inspired by that feeling of this is it, I've made a difference here. And I think another key thing to really take away is there's always going to be challenges.
Yeah.
In this process, as I said, it was difficult, it was long, it was tedious, I wanted to give up. But actually, it was in the midst of when I could have given up, it was in the midst of when I had nothing left to give that I knew myself and found myself. And actually, it's those challenges that gave me the confidence to go forward in what I want to do. So I think another key point there to take away is do not shy away from what might seem difficult. But actually, you know, we always hear about the whole David and Goliath scenario. That which may be your giant could be that turning point. It could be that revelation of actually, I can do this. And I think we spoke about young people and self-efficacy. For me, it gave me the confidence and the belief to not just say, this is what I want to do, but I can actually go out and get it.
Yeah.
And I think when we're looking at school and education, as you said, that transferal of knowledge and information, in everything that I try to do now, it's how has what I have experienced, how have what I have learned, and what I have become, how do I translate that? And that's lifelong learning outside of a school. So that is my water cooler wisdom.
Can I just share something?
Yes, you can.
Just as you were speaking, I just wrote some stuff down. The first thing I wrote down was, you are who you are when no one is watching. And I think that just the servitude that you expressed was literally your heart for the children. And I also just noted down as well that children are always watching you. So for those listeners out there, for those of you who work with young people or work with children, remember to be the example you want them to grow up to be. Because I think they're always looking at you. And they'll always see what you're doing. And they will always remember you as well.
And a shout out to the students, I just want to say, you are more than a student.
Oh,
you are more than a student. Do not box yourself
100%.
in that classification. You are a dancer, you are a teacher, you are whatever it is, have that freedom. But that is our water cooler wisdom for this lesson. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, the discussions, the back and forth. And remember, the conversation does not stop here. Follow us on our hashtags EdXSoc and Suffering Chronicles. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Limits Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. We have enjoyed it. And have a wonderful rest of the day.